Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb and Mark Gilbert.
Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. We're going to ask you the same question again this week as we thank you for being here with us. What if your mind is more than just a collection of thoughts? What if it's the gateway to a whole new way of living? Welcome to Conversations in Mind. I'm Reverend Barb. I'm joined by my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Mark Gilbert, and we are seeking to demystify the study of new thought and dive into the science and soul of consciousness. So whether you're a longtime seeker or curious about the power of your own perspective, we're going to jump into mind. But today we actually are doing things a little bit differently. We thought we'd share some about early books of influence on our journeys as we seek to get to know you and let you get to know us a little bit. And so some of this might not even be about new thought. It might be about how did we get to new thought? That's right. For me, this actually, it's been a fun week of thinking about this and remembering some of these old books that I don't even own anymore that I want to go now get and reread from, 40 years ago when I was asking questions. And I knew that the Lutheran Christianity that I grew up with did not fit and was seeking something. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I had a very similar process. It was a really great week of reflection on the books. You know, there were several that jumped out and said, of course that one, and of course that one. Yeah. And then I went through a process of like thinking about all the books that had been influential on me throughout my life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some were the antecedents to coming to New Thought, and some have come along after I came to New Thought, actually, where they supported my understanding of New Thought. They sort of folded into it and helped me develop a deeper understanding of New Thought. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a great process. And there's also a set of these books off to the side, which I'm not going to get into, which were like runners up.
I know, right? Because I could talk about books for 5 days.
Exactly.
If only I could remember all the titles.
Yeah, all week long, I kept having books pop into my head about what about that one? What about that one? You know, and there were a number of books that really had impacts on me at different points, sort of like were nudges in the direction that needed to go. You know, it's kind of interesting, Barb. I thought in doing this, it's also dovetailing an episode we did a couple of weeks ago back on, the key turning points in our spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. And so I started reflecting on that, thinking these books were part of those things. These books sort of dovetailed into the turning points because they were the right message at the right time, the right information, written in the right way that caught my eye and said this, and go this way. Yeah.
Literally had one of these fall off of a bookshelf basically into my hands is what it felt like at a bookstore in Oregon of all, I'm just wandering this bookstore and I swear it fell off the shelf. I don't know how, but yeah.
And we've not shared what our books are. So this will be, as we explore this, and Barb and I are going to go back and forth sharing one book at a time. And I'll also mention that these are not books that are necessarily the introductory books to New Thought. We may do an episode on that in the future, or maybe if it's in the end of this one, have time, we can mention some. But these books were ones that were instrumental on us. And as we're going through these books, I would like our viewers to be thinking about, well, what were those things that have been interesting books and that were signposts on the journey for you? And, hopefully this is a call for you to reflect on this process as well.
Oh, and post the books because we're always looking for new things to read too,
Yeah, exactly. We don't have enough. Well, you want to start us off? You want to kick us off with your first one?
Sure. This was one of those like total flashback moments, right? It hit me because my quest really was coming out of Christianity, coming out of the closet, realizing that I was a lesbian and dealing with that within the bounds of this very conservative Christian thing and seeking information about like how I could not feel this way or be this way or whatever. And so I rejected all of that for a long time, but there was just something missing in my life. And so just, trying to figure out what that is. And someone handed me a copy of a book called When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. And it was really, this is so long ago. I must have been like 20. Well, okay. Well, it was 20 years ago because I was 20 years old. And anyway, it is the story of the coming of Christianity, pre-Christianity and the pagan faith traditions, but also goes into how those pagan faith traditions were literally wiped out by Christianity / the shift to a patriarchal system in society, and how women were separated from one another, and just kind of this whole overview that got me going, wow, okay, all these things that I've been taught in my life were not necessarily true, didn't unfold that way really. And I would say that for me was one of the big turning points of not just discovering paganism as a foundational thing, but really doing that deep dive into what's really real, what's really true, and how much of what you have been taught in your life is not really true in that sense, and at least not for me. So please don't take offense if you love the Bible and you love Christianity and all that, but there was some definite conflict for me in all of that, so that was a big one. And there's a whole lot of other books around that, but that I then read, right? But that one was wow, okay, I got to do more homework.
Yeah. It's interesting you would mention, my first book had a very similar kind of thing, in the sense that, because what I'm hearing you say, Barb, is that there was like a sort of given that this is what life's truths and realities are. And what this book said was, what you've learned up to this point is not the full story.
Yeah. I mean, I was all of 20, right? So
yeah.
Maybe 19, 20, 21 in that range. So yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting that we come into early adulthood with that kind of like, well, everything that I've been told, this is the story, and not questioning it. At least that was my story as well.
Yeah.
The first book that I was going to share came in my last year of my undergraduate degree in college, where I was getting a bachelor in psychology. And what was interesting was that I had gone through and discounted Christianity as well for me as a faith, but I had a curiosity about life and why do I exist and all this other stuff. And that's why I had gotten into psychology. But then I got discouraged in psychology because everything at that time, and this is the early 70s, was behavioralism. And it said that everything we have to measure stuff in behavior because we can't get inside a person and think about their thoughts or so forth. So there was not even an acknowledgement of the internal awareness of a person in the psychology classes, maybe to a degree, a little bit with Maslow and theories of personality and things like that. But in my last class, we had a class on Robert Ornstein's book, The Psychology of Consciousness. The Psychology of Consciousness. And I'll add, we'll put these books in the show description so people can access.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. The Psychology of Consciousness. I don't know that one.
Well, it was written it's gone through several editions, and he was a psychologist who, I guess, the key takeaway for me out of this book was that he was saying that there's two modes of knowing. There is rational, linear, scientific, where we look at things logically and sequentially in time. And there's another mode of knowing that is, we look at things holistically, we look at things that transcend time. And in this book, he uses a lot of psychological information at the time, studies that had done, and looked at it from what was the internal awareness, what was consciousness. And he was encouraging people who are materialist scientists to think about the other aspects of life that transcend rational thought. And so much of people studies consciousness by looking at, the correlates between the firings of neurons in the brain and our bodily reactions or our thoughts that we have on it. But they don't go in and ask ourselves subjective awareness. And some of this book got into some of the scientific studies on that. But the interesting part was he also got into other traditions, Buddhism, Sufism, and told little stories. And he built this and talked about meditation practices and things like that and altered states of consciousness. So he tried to say, here's our daytime consciousness, which is this rational thought. And there's this
what is it?
and there's this nighttime consciousness where we transcend time, we transcend linear stories. In our dreams, we have a totally different sense of life than we do in our day-to-day waking affairs. And that there are bodies of studies through Buddhism, Sufism, Vedantic teachings, which he presents as sort of an intro to them, and says there's this other body of knowledge, and we need to bring them together and study the whole person and recognize that we've got not only rational thought, but intuition. And so it was sort of planting the seeds to me and pointed to me that the materialistic psychology of the day was not the total story. And it opened my eyes to starting to think about other means of spirituality as a means to answering the questions of meaning for me.
You're such a studier. I love this. This is where, I love the stories and you love the study. It's really interesting. So like that, but that book sounds fascinating even now. And must have been pretty groundbreaking at that time, frankly.
Yeah, Ornstein went on to write a bunch of other books, which I've got as well. But this is the one that woke me a little bit.
Yeah. So in that same sort of vein, the same sort of vein as my first one, I would say there's not so much specific books, but a couple of authors who really like. So there's a woman named Starhawk. She goes by Starhawk. Her name is Miriam Simos. I don't know, but nobody knows her as that. She's known as Starhawk. She's still actually, it was funny. I was talking to a friend who also follows her stuff and says she has a really great Substack still. And I'm like, oh my God, how old must she be? I gotta go find it. But she wrote a book called The Spiral Dance. And it is also another of goddess-based Wiccan spiritual practice, and which is really about the energy of the earth and the energy of all that exists, right? All that stuff is about energy and connection, especially with earth and people. And so that was, that was very opening for me, along with around the same time, there's a woman named Lynn Andrews who wrote this series called the Medicine Women series. And it's very Native American based or Native based practice. She was brought into a group of teachers and healers who allowed her to experience a lot of things that not everybody got to experience back then, right? And to write about them. And again, it was that whole feeling sense and connection sense and dream time and now I would call it this revelation of layers of consciousness. I didn't have that language back then, right? At all, but layers of consciousness and layers of awareness that are not in front of us all the time. And in my experience and the way I grew up, were never in my experience, I mean, we just didn't talk that way or live that way, to be open to that sort of thing. So it's like, as I'm thinking about this, it's like these were the early versions of the Force in a way, right? So early exposure to the Force in its own odd way. So yeah, I would say those were my pre even finding a new thought place to stumble into, But what happened for me in those is I found groups of Wiccan people, but who then also sort of wanted to pretend that the 2,000 years of the history of Christianity just didn't happen. And I am a person who loves the feeling things of those spiritually based of those spiritual paths, but I also need things to work in my brain.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that landed when I found a New Thought community, was that I was like, oh my God, this works in my heart and my brain.
Mm.
So, but anyway, next one for you.
Well, I want to build off what you were just saying, because again, what I'm hearing in you is a similar pattern, is that we both came from sort of like traditional backgrounds, in white America.
Yes.
And
God.
And it presents sort of a one view of life to you that is, yes, there's this thing called Christianity over there, but then what we really believe is the scientific materialism kind of life. And so then we get these glimmers through books. And I'm familiar with the Lynn Andrews books.
Are you? I love her.
Lots of them back here on the shelf.
I love her. Everything that came out. I was looking at the years that those came out, actually, and I'm like, oh my God, I was reading this stuff in the early 80s. But I read Medicine Woman came out in 1981. And I don't know when I discovered that one, but I know that I read everything after that.
And I think a lot of what these books, and the one I'm about to mention is my second book, had, is that there's an aspect to them where they say reality is bigger than you thought. Reality is bigger than you thought. Yeah. And there's these other things, and you go, wow, is this right?
And the political / the thing you were talking about, the white America, consumerism, all that stuff, that didn't always exist. And, you grow up in the United States, you just sort of get this idea that this is what has always been.
Yeah. My second book is Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda.
Yes. I didn't even think about that one. Yeah.
And this book came into my life by way of a suggestion. And I have to say, between college and, I got married and had kids, and I was working a career with the government. And, but I was always a spiritual seeker, going into metaphysical bookstores, trying to find stuff that would speak to me. Most of it, things that I would pick up, I would read, but not really comprehend them really well. And so I was still in that sort of questioning phase. And my first wife's father, it's a long story, but I'll simply say that he came back into her life, by way of that, my life, and he was a spiritual guru to a lot of people.
Wow.
And he had self-published his own spiritual book, and he was very much somebody who was into metaphysics. And he was coming to visit us, and he saw that I was especially interested in metaphysical teachings and things outside the norm. And so he is the one who bought and gave me a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi, which I've read. And it's interesting because when I first read it, what I think the main thing it opened to me to was Eastern philosophy at a very easy to understand story. If you try to pick up a lot of Eastern philosophy books or things that try to teach them, they use Sanskrit words or, words that are common in Buddhism that you don't understand as an English reader. And so it's hard to come into them as a newbie and understand them without somebody guiding you along. And I think that book served as sort of a guide or intro to recognizing there's these people who have this different spiritual path from you. It's as valid as the ones that you know about here in America.
Yeah.
But it's different. And it has different thoughts and different beliefs. And then you got this guy, Yogananda, who, grows up in India and then comes to America and creates a ministry here teaching Indian teachings, Vedantic teachings to a Western audience, and does it quite successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the ability to, in his language, to talk to a Western audience and introduce you to the concepts of Eastern thought in a way that you sort of like. It's a great story. If nothing else, it's a great story to read the book. And a little bit of your Western life is going, can this really have happened?
Is this true?
Is this true? But if you let go of that and just go with the spiritual parts of it, it opens your eyes to a bigger area of the world. And I think it sort of tweaked me in the direction of looking at other things that incorporated Eastern philosophy into it.
Yeah. Yes. You ever been to the property that they have in Southern California?
No, I have not, but there's interesting, just up the street, I could walk to it. There's a Yogananda Center.
Oh, really? Oh, they have
house.
total sidebar from the books, but they have this property that overlooks on a hill that overlooks the ocean outside of San Diego that is unbelievably beautiful. So, clearly he had some success with what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I can't remember in terms of like order where some of these things landed, but a couple of books that I go back to that have still resonance. Every once in a while, I will pick up Jonathan Livingston Seagull and read it again.
Okay.
And there is something about that story that just invokes for me, like, not only the sense of freedom, but this sense of knowing that there's a path in front of you, and if you follow it, you will find support and expansion and community in that also. I love Jonathan. When's the last time you read Jonathan?
It's probably been many years.
I'd say if you have it, I mean, it doesn't take long to read it.
Right.
But seriously, go back and read it. It's like this amazing. It's an amazing story, really. I know these are very like entry level things, but there we were, right?
No, it's a great book for giving you some principles in an easy to read and understand manner, and you can absorb the book, and then you can think about it. And I think that's what its real value is it gives you sort of a message about thinking about life and its direction and what your life is about.
Yes, and thinking about not the basic support or the basic, going with the crowd is not always the way. Like, I don't know. I just saw The Mandalorian, so this is the way is, but along that same line, Illusions by Richard Bach also.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, I love Illusions, and I still haven't figured out how to walk through walls, but
opening you to the idea of it, that's what's important.
Well, the idea that everything is connected,
right,
and that everything is energy, and that energy is how we move, and everything is love, and everything is energy is. And of course, I really want a book that you just open and it gives you the answer that you want, that you need at any given time. Because if you've not read Illusions, there's this guy who's a reluctant mystic, call it, which I can totally relate to in many ways, being a reluctant minister at one time in my life. He gets a book that when he asks the question, he opens the book and it basically hands him an answer. And I'm like, that would be amazing. So what's your next one?
Well, my next one is by Ernest Holmes.
Wow. Okay. We're jumping right up, huh?
Yeah. Because chronologically, this would be the next major book that popped into my, that served a key role in the development of my spiritual philosophy and outlook on life. And it's the Science of Mind textbook. And of course, anybody who has gone to a Science of Mind community and taken any classes, it's the book that they use in that. And although I don't think it's the easiest book to jump into by Holmes, and then that's another story altogether.
Right.
But it is the book that is used in most of the classes. And it can be a daunting book, and the reason I put it on, because it's one that I keep coming back to, that once I started the classes, and of course then became a minister, and then was teaching out of the book, that it has impacted me. But it's one that I first read it and got some of it. I got a surface.
Did you read it cover to cover?
I actually did read it to cover to
Good
cover.
for you. Wow.
and it's funny. I was in a class one time where they said, anybody here read the entire book? I think Marjorie Stamm, you remember her? She was teaching a class and asked that question. I was the only one who raised my hand.
Probably, because the rest of us were like, oh my God.
But, if she'd asked if I understood it, that would have been a totally different thing. But I had a surface understanding of the book. And then what's happened through time is I keep circling back to it, and I go off and I learn other things, or I approach things and go, have an aha moment, and then I come back to the book and find that it was in the Science of Mind textbook too, and I just didn't read it the first time. It's like I know that it wasn't there, but there's like when you're reading it, sometimes there's language because of his language of the time, the words that he uses, and sometimes he uses words that have a different meaning than what you mentally plug in when you're reading it the first time. You don't quite get all the depth of what he's writing about in the book. And I think what I've discovered is that it opened me to a certain path of the creative power of thinking to create our lives. But beyond that, and that's why I think it's been such an important book, is that every time I've encountered something else, which my next two books will get into, I've come back and found a lot of the content in these other books in Science of Mind, and I didn't get it the first time. It was like, whoosh, just went right over my head, But when I got somebody else to really explain it in a way that I got something, came back and Holmes was saying the same thing. And that's why I think it's such a deep, valuable book, and deeper than what an initial reading would be.
Did you have that moment of, I remember early class, like in foundations class, trying to read the textbook and just really struggling to read it, in some way. And then one day, it takes a while, but one day, like something clicks and all of a sudden you can read that book. I don't know if you had that experience also.
I don't know that I had a leap, but to me, it was a gradual thing. And I think to me, it's almost like learning another language.
It is. Yeah.
Because you're learning, because you're like, and you plug in for certain of his words, you skim over them because you don't know what the hell he's talking about. and other times you read it and you plug in your meaning for a word, and that's not what he means by that word.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't truly get it. And then, but as you develop the language and the understanding of how he uses terms, for me, it was a gradual process of going, okay.
Yeah. And you learn to flip to the glossary and,
you got to have the glossary open and read it. You had to, in fact, I tell people, stump through the glossary and just at least be familiar with the terms and knowing what's back there, so that when you encounter a word, you can stop and go. And of course, the whole thing about capitalizing things and non-capitalizing, and the ones that stand for a spiritual realm of
it could have been edited better. I will say that about the textbook. Like it could have had a better editor, I think, and that would have made a big difference. That could have made a big difference.
Well, Barb, we've gone through 3 books each. We got a couple more to go. Maybe this would be a good point to just remind people about the New Thought Media Network.
Yes, and thank you to those who have sent in donations through our code, and not only supported the network, but let them know that you're watching this program. We appreciate that enormously.
So as you listen to this message, if you're also listening to it on an audio podcast, we have a growing network of people. Last time I was looking, we've got at least people from 13 different countries who've downloaded audios from here. So this is wonderful to hear.
Nice.
And we've gotten some nice comments through Apple Podcast and such. So we're appreciative of all the comments, and we encourage you to put any kind of comment, no matter how you're getting this in. And we do monitor all of those for answering your questions and considering future topics. But we also want you to support the New Thought Media Network. So listen to these brief words.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
Thank you. And please, we do look for comments and for show suggestions. So, pop in there. So the book that fell off the shelf in my hands was the Celestine Prophecy. This is still before I think I had started, I want to say I had started dabbling in New Thought. I was going to the Huntington Beach church and taking some classes, but kind of popping in and out, and was very career focused and was in my mid 30s, like, doing the whole do, right? But I remember sitting in this bookstore and beginning to read that book, and I could barely leave the bookstore. Like, I just didn't want to put it down. And I know, and now I look at it and I'm like, okay, Barb, you're going to sound kind of cheesy with that one. But I think as I reflected on it, like, there's a part of me that's always that, and these other books, now that I've said things about them, I think there's a part of me that's had a pull to sort of spiritual community as a way of living. And the Celestine Prophecy does a lot of that, has a lot of that messaging and idea, but also just, again, this idea that we are bigger than this physical body, and we are bigger than, that everybody's bigger than this physical body, and that we can connect with one another in that way and in that place. So, and it's a good story, and I like a good story. Like, and as it unfolds, the lessons in it are really aligned with New Thought, frankly. They're
Right.
totally us in many ways. So, you're ahead of me on the journey. I was still dabbling.
To me, Celestine Prophecy falls into a whole series of books that were like late 90s, early 2000s, that were, there was a whole genre of books that really became big and popular, especially in the metaphysical and New Thought communities.
Oh, yeah.
So Redfield's book, Celestine Prophecy, was one of those. I read it. And yes, of course, it just reinforced the idea for looking at coincidences and how they provided meaning to your life, and looking at a non-physical aspect of life. It was a good way to do that. Yeah. But I would link that also with books like the Neale Donald Walsch Conversation with God book.
That was my next one, and I'll just lump it into this. The Conversations with God was kind of in that same time space, and really different, and at that time really different and kind of profound, and very like, okay, we can all connect with this information. Like, I never got it. I never felt like, oh, Neale Donald Walsch is a prophet. I felt like, if this can happen for one person, it can happen for anyone and all of us, right? And that, and that, I don't know, easy to, that.
No, they're both books, and ones that I considered as well for me, because they were influential. And I would add Deepak Chopra in and his 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. But I lumped them mentally into a series of books that were very influential, and taking what I was learning in New Thought and putting it in better language.
Yes, and I know that there were Deepak was part of. Deepak is hard right now, like.
Yeah, I get it.
Deepak is very sad making, in a way, but his work was profound.
Yeah, and I think all of those books came at a time that were really they tweaked me in a different direction collectively. I went a different direction with my fourth book.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we? But I had two things that sort of hit me as I got really involved with New Thought. Was I discovered the work of Ken Wilber, and I discovered the work of Don Beck and others in the spiral dynamics.
Okay.
And I was both taking training and listening to audios, and I really deepened into, and still am a fan of, Wilber's work to this day. And so my fourth book was a book called A Brief History of Everything, which came out in the late 90s, but it's a paperback book, and Wilber goes through and sort of summarizes this philosophy in a question and answer format. So it's unlike many of his books, it's an easy read, and you read it like a dialogue. And but what he opened me to, and what spiral dynamics opened me to, was the awareness that we're evolving. and that there is this process of spirit embedding itself into this universe, and that there is a spectrum or stratification where we're evolving back through to spirit. So the whole arc of involution, evolution, the fact that we have fallen from the divine and we're returning to the divine, that became evident through very philosophical writings of Wilber and the work of spiral dynamics, which talked about the fact that we move through worldviews. And that was interesting to me because it laid out and showed how there's different people in different stages of development of consciousness on the planet. And then we have these different levels bumping against each other. And that's a lot of the culture wars. It's because people are at different places and look at life differently. But we're all on the same path, which was what both of them gave to me. So, and Wilber gets much more, both of them have a spiritual undertone too, but Wilber's writing really, he calls the action in life, the material evolution, spirit in action. Spirit in action is evolution. And so even though Wilber seems very intellectual and heady in his books, he can be very poetic and philosophical. If I was going to recommend a Wilber book to somebody at this point in time, I would read his latest one, which is on discovering or seeing wholeness. It's a radical wholeness. Radical wholeness is in the title, but it really gets into non-duality and so forth. But this book, A Brief History of Everything, it outlined Wilber's whole model of we have an internal awareness and external awareness. We have it in the individual level, we have it at the collective level, that we're evolving, and that the whole process of evolution as being a spiritual force got reinforced me by both of those. But the book itself that I was pointing to was A Brief History of Everything, which is an interesting read by him. But final point on this is that when I had the light went off about, involution, evolution, I went back and then read Holmes again. And
it's right there, right?
Yeah, right there.
Right there.
I had to go get it from somebody else to truly understand it, and then come back and read him and go, now I see what he was saying. And that was one of those pearls of wisdom and the peeling of the onion that made the book more, the Science of Mind textbook, more accessible to me as understanding. And it gave a great meaning, because I'll just simply say this, and we've talked about this in prior episodes, that sometimes New Thought focuses too much on the manifestation of physical stuff in a material world. And what the involution evolution story gives meaning to why we even exist. That whole arc of forgetting our source and returning to our source, and that's what we're here to learn, gave me a deeper meaning and understanding of life. And I got it through Wilber.
Cool. Okay. Well, I didn't know that I was going to get something from get it and read it. So Radical Wholeness, that sounds like an interesting piece of the puzzle.
You've already given your fifth book, but talk about it, I think, right?
Have I what, huh?
Didn't you talk about, maybe I had you jump ahead because you jumped into Conversations with God. Was that your fifth book?
Yeah. You want to go ahead with another one?
Well, did you want to say more about that?
About Conversations with God? No, I think, everybody's read it for one, but like everyone's read it, right? But no, I kind of want to leap into, as we're, running our time clock out, where the New Thought things really landed for me. You already talked about the textbook. That was a big part of it, as taking all the classes and getting into the textbook and others of Holmes' books. But I found Joel Goldsmith in there, and Practicing the Presence and The Art of Spiritual Healing were really big for me. I have a real pull to the healing practices of the early New Thought movement, and that mind over matter, mind moving matter. I don't like to call it over matter, mind moving matter, and the potential and possibility of physical healing through mental work has always really pulled me. And so Goldsmith has I find him sort of a gentler version of Holmes in a way.
Yeah.
And and just really profound. And he practiced what he preached. He practiced what he wrote, and so I love his work. But practicing the presence and the art of spiritual healing, I think, were really big pieces of this in my earlier moving into this practice and faith tradition.
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful authors like him that take the teachings and they put them in such beautiful poetic language that speaks directly to the heart, and rather than the head.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the key things that Goldsmith can do. It's just valuable to read him in that light. I think the closest Holmes comes is probably this thing called Life and this thing called You, or probably his most to my mind.
I love this thing called Life. That's like the textbook is a mental wrestling match sometimes.
Right.
This thing called Life is not at all.
Yeah.
It's just
And like I was speaking to Ken Wilber, most of his books are very heady, like Holmes, and that's probably something that attracts me, is that logical kind of mindset and approaching things from that. But both Wilber and Holmes have this poetic side that bursts out at certain times.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
The fifth book I want to get to is that one that hit me probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was at this point in my life where I was going back to basics and rediscovering things, and I was going through my books and discovered this book I'd bought called The Kybalion.
Oh.
And The Kybalion was written in 1908 by William Walker Atkinson, who was an early day New Thought writer, but he published under a lot of pseudonyms. He actually published a magazine called New Thought, and he wrote all the articles, but he wrote them under different names.
Really?
Yeah.
My God, I did not know that.
He's best known for his books that he wrote as Yogi Ramachakarka. He wrote a whole series of books as an Indian Vedantic teacher that were some of the best early books that explained Eastern philosophy to a Western audience in the early turn of the 20th century. But he wrote one book that he titled it under the name Three Initiates. And the book was supposedly written by 3 individuals who were studying Hermeticism, and they were referencing an earlier ancient book that they had been studying called the Kybalion. And this is confusing because the book, the Kybalion, that I'm talking about, that I read and had an influence on me, is a book where it manufactures 3 made-up people who were studying an ancient book called the Kybalion, where they quote it in the book you're reading called the Kybalion.
That's wild. Okay. Yeah.
But they come up and they basically outline 7 key principles about Hermetic teachings that are applicable to life. And I'll tell you what they're called real quickly, because I bookmarked it in one of my editions of the Kybalion. But it calls the principle of mentalism, that everything is mind. It's in alignment with science of mind. The principle of correspondence, that things are connected, that as above, so below, that there's a material connection to the non-material realm. The principle of vibration, that everything is vibrating at different vibratory levels. The principle of polarity, that things yin and yang between left and right and up and down and good and bad. The principle of rhythm, that everything is that not only vibrating, but everything is dancing in sort of a rhythmic dance between things. That the principle of cause and effect, that in midst of all of this, there are causes, mental causes for all of the physical things that we see. And the principle of gender. And so the key things that came out of this book, and the gender is not sex, it's sex in the physical realm, but it's understanding the nature of how gender plays out in the mental various vibratory realms and so what it allowed me to see was that there's a stratification from physical life from the lowest basis of physical realms to spirit, and everything is vibrating in a different level. They're going back and forth between polarities, and that there are causes for everything, and that we are experiencing life in multiple realms. So that and I often say, I sort of chunk it into, we're in a physical realm, a mental realm, and a spiritual realm. But it's really shades of gray where we blend and move between these. And Wilber, interestingly, writes about it as body-mind. He says that when we walk around in this life, it's the body-mind. We have a body and we have a mind, and we see ourselves as this sort of body and a mind. But they're different vibratory levels, and the Kabbalion opened my eyes to that. It's like things started clicking. And then again, went back to Holmes, and I'm going, he talks about vibrations and vibratory levels. And, it's so much of
we also have body, mind, and spirit, right? Like the three. Yeah. I mean,
things that just went over my head. Like I said, I went off and read this, and all of a sudden, so people who come to me now, they say, what would you rate as a book to support understanding science of mind? I said, well, I haven't read the Kabbalion from 1908. Go read it, because
I remember picking that up a number of times, and I don't think I ever read it. I don't know why. I don't own it. I'm going to have to.
I've got multiple copies, and I will say to anybody who's curious, it's in the public domain, and you can find free editions of it out there. And people, you can buy copies on Amazon ebooks for 99 cents of it. You can find it easily.
Yeah. There's so much now that is, available and supportive and expansive, even beyond, and particularly beyond the idea that all of this is about getting stuff or, gaining stuff or material wealth of any kind. I think, there's just so much out there now that is about having an expanded awareness of our connection with one another and with spirit and this larger than ourselves way of being in the world.
So as we have reflected over these major books that have brought us to this point and where we are, what's on the horizon for you? If you could summarize in a moment or two, what are you reading right now that's direct to the next step?
So many different things right now.
Is there a theme to them? Do you see like a commonality to what?
Yeah, I mean, I just re-picked up Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, Finding the Path to Your True Self, which is quite good, actually. I think the theme in what I'm doing right now is really almost back to this energetic connection with all of life, this sense of wholeness within that, and the connection with all of life and life experience, and learning to live more fully again, or not even again, really just continuing to learn to live more fully in the world and of the world and not of the world, in a way. And that sounds corny as all hell. I get it. But that's, I would say that's kind of where it's all landing right now in very interesting ways. And I'm actually getting a lot out of reading other people's work on Substack, and people who are kind of in these conversations, people that I know who are in these conversations in their life. And so I've also, like many people in the movement, been reading an enormous amount about systems and equity and the systems that need to fail in this country and beyond, so that we can move forward collectively. Like, I'm not interested in being the guru on the hill. I never have been. I want all of us to be moving forward collectively into an experience of life that is more caring and more open and more community minded. Then we've talked about this a lot, actually, in our personal conversations. Like, I want to live in the dynamics of the show Shrinking. Like, I think you do too. I think you brought that up. Actually, you do too. Like, so what about you? I know that you are studying Holmes again. Like, you're back studying his speaking more than his published writing. But
because of my work with the Science of Mind archives, I've really gotten into and have researched a lot, and I'm working on another book too. I put out the Ernest Holmes at Asilomar a few years ago in concert with the archives and Science of Mind Publishing, and we're all in agreement and working on a new book, which I'm compiling. But that's just one thing, so I'm into Holmes' work, but at the same time, what's drawing me is Eastern teachings, Aurobindo and Ramana Maharshi's work. And so the practical aspects or ways of reminding myself of creating a consciousness that transcends the physical, but also comes back with that awareness into the physical. So if I were going to summarize it, it would be that I'm reading a lot that's reminding me of the importance of developing a non-dual realization of life.
Yeah.
And then moving from that space. And then that does call you back to social activism, because you see the world and you want to create that world. But it's the Eastern writings that are reminding me of how to do that and to develop the eyes that look out at life and see it from a non-dual perspective. So
yeah, and like I'm really, we had Darlene Green on a few weeks ago, right? And her fourth book is about to come out. And I'm really looking forward to that because in conversations with her, there's this very clear, like, we're not separate, and this sense of not wholeness as a human, but wholeness within the realm of all that is. And, and she's so clear about it that I'm curious about how this book reads. I've read some excerpts. She had sent me some excerpts from it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole thing. So I'm looking for those things, really, that how are we as a body of human beings going to move forward in a way that actually supports our planet, supports our lives, supports each other, and reveals in a more profound way our connection.
Yeah. One of the things from our conversation with Darlene a few weeks ago was it planted the seeds in my thinking that we might want to do an episode talking about alternative means of obtaining information.
Oh, that'd be fun.
She talked about, getting her information from ascended masters. I relate to that. My wife and I have gone to channelers for many years and listened to channeled information. There's a person with the IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who teaches that we all channel. And that channeling is a spectrum that we can, from intuition and little hunches, to full-blown trance channeling is a spectrum, and there's things along the way. So people who speak to angels or any of those, it's something that's within all of us. And so what it points to is that we all have access to higher realms of information. We think that we only have info through the sensory stuff, and it gets back to that first book I mentioned about the psychology of consciousness and the fact that there's daytime life of consciousness and there's nighttime. And the nighttime includes intuition, hunches, other means of information flowing into us. And I think it'd be kind of interesting for us maybe to delve into that. If anybody listening thinks it's a good idea, leave a comment.
Well, and even along that line, fiction is. So Dan Brown just published *The Secret of Secrets*, right?
Yes, I read that.
Yeah. I love that book. The astral projection and the work of the Noetic Science group. Actually, he's got a bunch of their work in that book, and and some of their people in that book. Lynn McTaggart for one, but.
Yeah, and Dean Radin as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because at the very beginning, anybody who's got a copy of the book, go and read the first quote in the first page is from Tesla. And it's like, essentially, when science discovers and starts investigating the non-material realm, then it will make leaps and bounds in understanding and wisdom. So that's what we're really, truly talking about. And I think the books that we've outlined in this session today were those books that were pointing Barb and I to the higher realms, to beyond the limitations of our life and what we'd been taught, and gave us the seeds and the glimmer of information that was going to point us in the next direction of where we needed to go.
Yeah, totally. I mean, books have been the leader, really, like in so many ways, right? I mean, none of this got downloaded without me actually opening a page and reading. So.
Well, we hope everybody's enjoyed this, and we appreciate everybody coming along for the ride and listening to our books, and hopefully gave you the idea to think about key things that have guided you on your journey. So we appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, and book suggestions are always welcome. Thank you all.